The camera opens over the Atlantic Ocean, waves rolling toward a distant skyline. A voice breaks in, steady, resonant, timeless. Welcome to New York City, a place born not out of quiet destiny, but roaring ambition. The world knows it today for its skyscrapers, its stock markets, its blinding billboards, and sleepless nights. But long before the neon, the subway tunnels, the thunder of taxi horns, and the whisper of Wall Street deals, this land was quiet. It was forest, marshland, rivers, and the homeland of the Lenape people, who hunted, traded, and lived here for centuries, before any European set foot on the soil we now call Manhattan. Their villages lined the banks of the rivers we now name the Hudson and East River. They grew corn, squash, beans, and lived by rhythms of the seasons. They knew this place not as New York but as Manhattan, the island of many hills. That is where this story begins. In 1609, a European ship cut across these waters. Henry Hudson, sailing for the Dutch, stepped into the river that would later bear his name. He didn't know it then, but his arrival marked the beginning of one of history's most dramatic transformations. The Dutch soon claimed the land, calling it New Netherland, and in 1624, they built the first European settlement here. A busy trade port grew quickly, not soldiers and castles, but merchants and markets. The Dutch didn't come to rule, they came to trade. Fur, timber, tobacco, and anything a ship could carry back across the Atlantic. By 1626, a Dutch director named Peter Minuit made a deal with the Lenape. Manhattan was purchased, at least in European understanding, for goods worth roughly 60 Dutch guilders, often simplified into the legendary $24. But history reminds us, this was not a sale in the way Europeans imagined. The Lenape did not believe anyone could own land. So while one side traded, the other believed they had shared rights, not surrendered them. Colonists built New Amsterdam at the southern tip of Manhattan. Narrow streets, brick houses, open markets, chatter in Dutch, English, French, Spanish, and dozens more. Even in its infancy, New York was a melting pot. And yes, the city was diverse before the word even existed. Then came 1664. British ships arrived, cannons aimed at the tiny Dutch port. With little resistance, the colony was taken, and New Amsterdam became New York, named after the Duke of York. Under British rule, streets expanded, trade intensified, and slavery, deep and brutal, became foundational to the city's early economy. New York had the largest enslaved population in the northern colonies. This is also New York's history, and it cannot be erased. As the 18th century unfolded, dissatisfaction grew. Taxes, restrictions, and the heavy hand of the British Crown pushed colonists toward rebellion. Taverns and meeting halls buzzed with ideas of liberty. In 1776, from this very city, the British pushed George Washington's army out, turning New York into a strategic British stronghold throughout the American Revolution. Fires destroyed a third of the city that same year, and spies, soldiers, and secret codes filled the streets. When the war ended, the impossible had happened. The United States was born. And guess where its first capital stood? Not Philadelphia, not Washington, but New York City. In 1789, on Wall Street, George Washington took his oath as the first president of the United States. Church bells rang, crowds roared, and the world began to recognize New York not simply as a port, but as the pulse of a nation. By the 1800s, something unstoppable took over immigration. Ships poured into New York Harbor, carrying families from Ireland escaping famine, Germans fleeing political turmoil, Italians dreaming of work, Jews escaping persecution, and millions more. When the Statue of Liberty arose in 1886, it did more than decorate a harbor. It stood as a declaration. Bring us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Then came Ellis Island, a gateway unlike any other on Earth. Between 1892 and 1954, over 12 million immigrants passed through its halls. Their names changed, their languages mixed, but their hopes remained the same. They built railroads, worked in factories, stitched clothes, dug tunnels, opened shops, and filled the neighborhoods: Little Italy, Chinatown, Harlem, Lower East Side, Brooklyn's Brownsville, Queens Astoria, and more. The city climbed upward. Steel allowed the impossible. Skyscrapers pierced clouds. The Flatiron Building, the Woolworth Tower, and then a pair of giants. The Empire State Building in 1931, and Rockefeller Center soon after. The skyline became not just buildings, but symbols of human ambition, and then New York learned tragedy. In 1929, Wall Street collapsed. The Great Depression hit New York harder than almost anywhere. Bread lines stretched across blocks, men sold apples on street corners, families crowded into tiny rooms. Yet even in that darkness, music was born: jazz in Harlem, swing in Manhattan, lights on Broadway. New York suffered but refused to sleep. The mid-20th century brought rebirth again. World War II turned New York into a command center of industry and diplomacy. In 1945, the United Nations chose New York as its home. Imagine it. The city first fought over by empires now became the world's dialogue table. Then came the cultural revolutions: bebop in Harlem, punk in the East Village, hip-hop in the Bronx, abstract art in Soho. New York didn't just observe culture, it created it, it shaped it. It broadcast it to the world. The skyline rose again with the World Trade Center towers in the 1970s, declaring New York the headquarters of global finance. But on September 11, 2001, the unthinkable happened. The towers fell, firefighters climbed into lethal dust. Thousands of lives were lost. For a moment, the city that never sleeps fell silent. Yet again, New York rose. The memorial pools now stand where the towers once touched the sky. Names engraved in stone, water falling endlessly into the earth, a reminder of loss, resilience, and unity. Today, New York is more than a city. 8.5 million people speaking more than 800 languages live, hustle, argue, love, and create here. From Times Square's lights to Central Park's quiet mornings, from Wall Street negotiations to Bronx block parties, from subway performers to high-rise boardrooms, New York is contradiction and harmony at once. Its history is not a straight line. It is struggle, reinvention, immigration, innovation, heartbreak, and triumph. It began as Manhattan, the island of hills and rivers. It became a Dutch marketplace, a British port, an American capital, a global immigration gateway, and finally, the world's economic and cultural powerhouse. As the camera pulls away and the skyline glitters against the Atlantic dusk, one truth remains: New York is never finished. It is always becoming something new. And every person who has walked its streets, from the Lenape to the latest immigrant stepping off a plane, is part of its unstoppable story. Because New York is not just a place on a map. It is an idea of ambition, of survival, of creation. A city that does not simply exist, but demands to be felt. New York City, the world's city, yesterday, today, and forever. New York, now bursting with ambition, began transforming faster than any other city on Earth. The arrival of electricity, elevators, and steel-frame construction turned ordinary streets into towers of dreams. By the late 19th century, Manhattan no longer expanded outward, it shot upward. Skyscrapers were no longer engineering experiments. They became symbols of identity. Every building tried to outdo the last, every architect reaching higher, every financier dreaming bigger. New York wasn't just building structures, it was building statements. The Statue of Liberty, rising proudly in the harbor, welcomed millions. For immigrants crossing the Atlantic after weeks at sea, she wasn't just a monument, she was hope made of copper and flame. As ships approached Ellis Island, hearts pounded. Papers were examined, names recorded, tears shed. The greatest human migration in modern history poured into a single city. Italians, Irish, Jews, Chinese, Caribbean families, they didn't just arrive, they rewired the cultural DNA of New York. Nearly every second face in Manhattan belonged to someone who spoke no English, carried no riches, but held fire in the heart and determination in the eyes. Soon, the city found rhythm. Jazz echoed through Harlem as African-American culture redefined American music and literature. The Harlem Renaissance was not just an artistic shift, it was a rebirth of identity. A surge of voices that could no longer remain silent. Clubs filled with trumpets, saxophones, poetry, and soul. Duke Ellington, Langston Hughes, Billie Holiday, New York became their stage and the world listened. Then, Wall Street. A narrow street that would become the most influential financial nerve center on Earth. Markets soared, banks multiplied, and fortunes were made overnight. Manhattan became the global capital of money, movement, speculation, ambition, and risk. But risk does not rise without consequence. In 1929, the stock market collapsed, sending shockwaves across the world. Breadlines stretched for blocks. Families lost everything. Dreams turned to dust. Yet New York did what it always did: endure, rebuild, and climb back out of darkness. World War II reshaped the globe, and once again, New York became a gathering point not of war machines but of peace. The United Nations headquarters rose on Manhattan soil, a silent promise that humanity would try, at least try to prevent another global catastrophe. New York was no longer just America's city. It was the world's city, a place where nations negotiated, cultures merged, and ideas collided. The skyline changed again in the 1970s. Twin giants rose from Lower Manhattan, the World Trade Center towers. They symbolized strength, unity, and global commerce. They touched clouds, reflected sunrise, and defined a horizon. But as the city rose, it also wrestled with unrest. Crime surged, the subway decayed, graffiti coated the streets, and many wondered if the city that never sleeps was collapsing under its own weight. Yet music changed everything again. Hip-hop was born in the Bronx, a beat that would echo across the world. What began as street rhythm became a universal language. Then came a day that reshaped history. September 11, 2001, a morning of blue skies turned into smoke, chaos, and heartbreak. The Twin Towers, once symbols of ambition, fell in the most tragic attack America had ever seen. Streets filled with dust, firefighters ran toward flames, strangers held strangers, and the world watched in disbelief. Yet even in loss, New York's character did not break. Candles lit, names read, memorial walls filled with messages of love. The city mourned, but it did not surrender. From the ashes, One World Trade Center rose not just rebuilt concrete, but a message: New York stands always. Today, the city continues to evolve at a pace no map can fully capture. Digital screens replace billboards, autonomous taxis join yellow cabs, and Times Square glows brighter than ever, pulsing with the heartbeat of 8 million souls. Immigrants still arrive, students still dream, artists still paint, musicians still hustle, and entrepreneurs still chase impossible visions. Food from every country spices its streets. Voices in 100 languages echo through stations and sidewalks. New York is the only city where the world doesn't visit, it lives. From Dutch trading outpost to global capital of art, finance, diplomacy, music, architecture, and culture, New York remains a miracle of movement. A place built by hands that came from oceans away. A city that survived depression, war, fire, crime, and terror. It's more than skyline, more than theater, more than commerce. It is humanity in compressed form, bright, broken, loud, lyrical, flawed, fearless, and forever rising. As night falls, the skyline lights up, bridges glow over dark water, and the city hums with relentless energy. It is true, New York never sleeps. Not because it cannot, but because it refuses to stop dreaming. If you ever walk along its avenues, stand beneath its towers, sit by its rivers, and feel its pulse, you will understand New York isn't just a city. It is a world condensed into streets and stories, constantly writing its next chapter.